To pin it on a mosque.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of Post-Gazette Live. I am Paul Zeise, of course. We go live every day right around 5 o'clock, between 5 and 5:10. We try and get it going, and we talk usually about whatever it is that we're going to talk about. Obviously, the Steelers are a big topic right now at this time. But we also talk a little bit about the NFL. At large, we've got some different things that we're going to have to piece together, of course. And, of course, I think one of the biggest things is we try and hit every single thing that we can in the time that we have together. We could start with last night. With the Chargers and the Ravens. And the reason that game is actually relevant in many ways for the Steelers is because now the way that it looks, I mean, the Ravens have basically jumped over the Chargers. And if the Steelers are going to win the AFC North, I think there's a really good chance now that their first round opponent will be the Chargers. And I think that's a good thing. Obviously, the Chargers are a team that I think the Steelers can beat. I don't know that they're as explosive as they need to be on offense. One of the things about the Chargers that I don't really understand is they have Justin Herbert. They paid for, they've paid for a big-time quarterback, and they really haven't surrounded him with a whole bunch of really good players. I mean, that's what I would tell you. It's really important to note. I mean, you've got the receivers are pedestrian. I guess if you think about it, J.K. Dobbins is okay, but he's been hurt so much. He's not nearly what he was. They're just sort of okay when it comes to the, skill positions. And I don't know that you can win if you're that thin at the skill positions. I just don't. I think that if you think about where you're at when you're the Steelers, if you're the Steelers, you should have a really good chance to beat the Chargers. So I think what happened last night, even though you're rooting against the Ravens in the AFC North, to me, I feel like, well, the Steelers still have a game, they're a game up on them, and so you still are leading the Ravens. You're still in a place where you can, if you win the games you're supposed to win, and if you beat the Ravens, you can win the AFC North. But one of the things that probably is going to happen now that wasn't really guaranteed yesterday is that you get to play the Chargers in the first round as opposed to the Ravens. Of course, it all goes to hell if you lose a few games and the Ravens win the AFC North, but that's a different story for a different day. I can only go by what is happening right now and what happened last night. And I can tell you the Ravens winning was actually a good thing for the Steelers, because I think that it probably makes it so that it's going to be really, really hard for the Steelers and the Ravens to match up with each other. Whoever the AFC North winner is going to be is probably going to be the 3 seed, especially since the Texans can't get out of their own way. And that's a different story for a different day. But if you think about it, the 3 seed is going to be the AFC North team. I don't anticipate that Buffalo is going to lose, more than one more game. And I don't anticipate the Chiefs are going to lose more than one more game. And so they'll be the first and the second seed, in whatever order. And then the AFC North team is probably going to be the third seed. I think that's going to be an important piece of it because, again, I think it means you're going to avoid – because I think whoever doesn't win the AFC North is going to be the 5 seed. So if you look at it right now, right now it's the Chiefs are the 1, Buffalo is the 2, the Steelers are the 3, Houston is the 4, the Ravens are the 5, the Chargers are the 6, and the Broncos are the 7. I don't see much movement in that whole thing, other than the one thing I could see happening is the Steelers and the Ravens flipping. But that would require the Ravens to beat the Steelers, and then maybe the Steelers lose to somebody like the Eagles or somebody else, and so the Ravens end up winning the AFC North. But I expect the Ravens and the Steelers to be the 3 and the 5 seed in one of those two orders. So I think that in short, it wasn't a bad development that the Chargers lost the game last night, because now they're behind the Ravens, and the Ravens have a game, a tiebreaker. So I'm pretty sure now they're going to be locked into that 6th spot. It's interesting. I was looking at the AFC. If you look at the playoff picture, after the 6th spot, the 7th spot where Denver is, I mean, you've got a lot of bad, mediocre, whatever you want to call them, teams. You've got a bunch of teams. I've not seen it like this before, where it seems so clear who the 6 playoff teams are going to be. It seems so clear, and we're only in week 12 or 13 or whatever it is. It seems so clear who the playoff teams are going to be. The one team that is a little bit of a wild card, they've surged a little bit in recent weeks, is Miami, the Dolphins, obviously. And that's mostly because, they've played a couple of bad teams back to back. I guess this week, if they can, on Thanksgiving night, if they can beat Green Bay, then I'll start to take them a little more serious. But I just don't see them climbing back into it. So to me, it feels like the 7 teams that are in a playoff spot right now, I think they really are. The 7 teams that are locked in right now are probably going to be the 7 teams. And I don't see that order of them moving much either. I don't see it. I don't see the order of it moving much. I think that when you count, the games that have to be played, and you look at where all the teams are, it seems pretty clear to me that there's not going to be that much movement among the teams at the top. I think the Chiefs of the Bills will be 1 and 2. Like I said, the AFC North champ will be 3. The Texans will be 4. The AFC North second place team will be 5, and then you'll have the Chargers and the Broncos. I mean, that's where that is at. And I think one of the things that makes this year a little bit different, I think the Bills are the best team. I actually think they're better than the Chiefs. But if you look at the teams at the bottom of the playoff bracket, I honestly think that the Broncos and the Chargers, for that matter, will have an opportunity to win a game. And I think that, that's all you can ask for. It's all you can ask for as a fan. You basically just say, okay, I just want really good games, and I think you're going to get them in the playoffs. I think the AFC is a very interesting conference right now. I don't know that the Chiefs and the Bills are that much better. They're better, but I don't know that they're that much better than the Broncos and the Chiefs. I mean, the Broncos and the Chargers. And so all of these games could come down to, a couple of plays. And, I would favor the home team still, but outside of the 5-4 matchup, it's interesting. The Steelers or the Ravens, if they're the 5 seed, they're going to be favored. They're going to be favored probably when they play against the Texans down in Houston. So, and I think that's because Houston is really kind of a team that last year, they peaked and they did some great stuff. And, C.J. Stroud was the flavor of the month. And then what happened? This year, they found out it's a little bit tough. It's a little bit tougher the second year when everybody's sort of waiting for you and ready for you. So they've got some work to do to get back to where they need to get to. But nevertheless, I look at the Steelers and where they're at, and I think, you know what? They're in a pretty good place. And it got a little bit better last night because I think that if they can hold on to the 3 seed, which I think they will, if they can hold on to the 3 seed, they're facing a much easier first-round game than it would have been had the Ravens still been sitting there at 6, had the Ravens lost last night and then they were behind the Chargers and lost the tiebreaker. But I just can't get out of my head, though, the fact that I think this AFC playoffs is going to be really, really good. I do. I think it's going to be as good as we've seen them, the playoffs be in a long time. And that's going to be interesting. One thing I was doing today, in case you don't know, on Tuesdays I write a column. We call it Zeise's Right, and it's an NFL column. But one thing I was doing today was trying to figure out who the best team in the NFL is. Now, who the best team in the NFL is probably different from, what team do you have to say is favored to win the NFL? And I'll tell you, I looked at the numbers for Detroit. Speaking of Thanksgiving, I looked at the numbers for Detroit. And I was amazed at how good Detroit really is. I mean, they're plus minus point differential, whatever you want to call it, is plus 177. The Bills are the only other team that have a plus minus over 100, and the Bills are 106. Now think about that. The Lions are 177 to the good in terms of point differential. The next best team is 106. And they're the only 2 teams that are over 100 in terms of point differential. I mean, that's how dominant the Lions have been. And, of course, I know they've had some blowouts that probably that skew those numbers a little bit, but they've won a bunch of games by 10 or more points, not just 1 or 2. They've won, I think, 5 or 6 games by 10 or more points. They've got the number 3 or 4 ranked run defense. They've got the number 1 total offense. I think they're number 1 in scoring offense. I mean, they're really good, dominant. Dare I say, this might be the year where we have to take the Lions really seriously. Last year we took them seriously to a degree, but it just felt inevitable that they were going to lose, and of course they did. But this year, I'll be honest with you, I'm watching what they're doing. In the last 2 weeks, I want to say they've outscored their opponents like literally something like 78-12, something like that. I mean, they're that good. So to me, the discussion about where is it that they fit, I think they're the best team. They have to be given the mantle as the best team. That's a different discussion than do I think they'll win the Super Bowl? I mean, they could, but as I've said many times over the last 4 or 5 weeks, as unimpressive as they are from time to time, as much as they seem to, be in these games where they leave the other team hanging around, as much as they, seem to need miracles at the end to win games, the Chiefs still have Patrick Mahomes and nobody else does. And that's the thing that I think if you look at it from that standpoint, you still got to pick the Chiefs, even though I think the Bills are better and I think the Lions are better. These are 2 teams that, to me, I think are better than the Chiefs. But until you beat Patrick Mahomes when it counts, it doesn't count. Doesn't matter what you do in the regular season. That's what I try and, impress upon people in these parts who want to go on and on and on about Mike Tomlin. And, of course, if he wins Sunday in Cincinnati, well, it'll be another non-losing season. You never had a losing season. But again, I think people are tired of that because from the standpoint of all that matters is what you do in the playoffs. That's all that matters. And if you're the Steelers, listen, if you're the Jets, getting to the playoffs and losing is acceptable. In fact, getting to the playoffs might be a reason to celebrate. Just getting to the playoffs. But I think that at the end of the day, if you're the Steelers, and there are some people say, well, there's a lot of teams that would love to just be there every year or be in the position every year. Yeah, but that's not what the standard of the Steelers is it? I mean, philosophically, the Steelers are supposed to be a different standard type of team. They're supposed to be a team, okay, where the standard is trying to win a Super Bowl every single year, trying to win a Super Bowl. And if you fall short of that, it's a little bit of a disappointment. If you don't win a playoff game, it's a big disappointment. And so now we've gone 7 years without a playoff win. It feels to me like the philosophy of the Steelers has shifted from, excellence, wanting excellence and demanding, championships and demanding playing in playoff games and all that other stuff to, well, as long as we get to the playoffs, as long as we go 9-8, we're happy. Or better yet, as long as we go 8-1, we're happy because it's not a losing season. And if we just continue to do that, where we, continue to knock on the door every year, every year, well, you know what, damn it, it's going to happen. Again, there's an old saying in the military, okay? Hope is not a method, okay? Hope is not a method. And it feels like for the last 4 or 5 years, the Steelers' method has been hope. Well, if we get to the playoffs, anything can happen. Well, not really. We can see generally as the season's moving on that, okay, well, you're not good enough. You're not going to be good enough. Whatever you're doing is not good enough. But, just getting to the playoffs and hoping, that's not good enough, if you ask me. If you're a Steelers fan, if you've watched the Steelers, if you've grown up with the Steelers, that's never been the standard before. And, I understand that, Bill Cowher had a couple losing seasons, or at least I think it was one, was it like a 7-9 and a 6-10 or something like that? And they stuck with him. And of course, he came back and won a Super Bowl. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. There's no guarantee that, hey, if we stick with Mike Tomlin, he's going to find his fastball again. There are some people that don't seem to understand, okay? The Super Bowl that Mike Tomlin won was in 2008. 2008. It's 2024. So now what do? Do we wait until 2030? Do we just keep staying the course until 2035? As long as they have winning seasons every year or non-losing seasons every year? Right? Is that what we do? I don't know. I just know that you've got to try and figure something out here. And to me, that's a big, big part of what is happening for this season. And I would just basically say, Jonathan asked, what quarterback have they had that could have led them to Super Bowls? Well, they had a guy by the name of Ben Roethlisberger for, until what, 2021 or so, 2022, whatever it was. They've had 2021, I guess it would have been, because they had a year with Trubisky and company. Or did they have 2 years with those guys? And then this year, so 24, 23, 22. Yeah, 2021. Up until 2021, they had Ben Roethlisberger. They had a good enough quarterback. That wasn't the problem. And again, we're not going to rehash all of their playoff losses. All I'm telling you is this. This is a year where I think the Steelers are in a good position to win a playoff game. But if he doesn't win a playoff game, is it fair to ask how many more years they're going to do this with him? Like, it's similar to Mike Sullivan. It's great that he won a couple of Stanley Cups for the Penguins. But guess what? They're not responding to him anymore. His system doesn't work with the talent they have. His style doesn't work with the talent they have. And it seems to me like they've sort of tuned him out. So I'll just tell you, I look at it and I just say basically it's got to be a situation in many, many ways where this is a big year for them. And that's where it is. And I think that this is a year they have the ability to go out and do some things and be good at what they do and win some playoff games. But if they don't, it's fair to ask the question. It really is. It's fair to ask that question. It's interesting. We talk about coaches, and you look at around the AFC or around the NFL, really. I was trying to compile a list because, the NFL, quote unquote, experts, the national guys, they all basically say that there's going to be 7-8 openings this year. We already know there's 2. The Saints and the Jets, have already fired their coach. So let's say there's those 2. I don't think there's 5 or 6 more guys that are getting fired. I mean, you look at Brian Daboll in with the Giants, he should be fired. He should be, but it sounds to me like they're basically committed to him for at least 1 more year. Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys, Jerry Jones came out today and said that, hey, it's not out of the realm of the, it's not crazy for me to, re-sign him and give him an extension. I'm not saying both of them survive, but I also don't think anymore that both of them are going to be fired. Matt Eberflus, the one thing about him with the Bears, Caleb Williams is getting better. He's the franchise quarterback, and if you're the coach that's oversaw him getting a little bit better and better and better every week, you might have bought yourself another year if you're Matt Eberflus. The Antonio Pierce, it's only his first year, but I think what they finally figured out is that he's not a very good coach. I mean, one of the things that happens with him is he was made the interim coach. During last season, they fired their head coach. He was made the interim coach. He came in with all the rah player stuff. Rah stuff. Got that team to play above its head a little bit. Guys played with enthusiasm. They played hard. They played tough. They played for a player's coach and all that good stuff. And then guess what happened? This year, he's had to actually coach. And I just think that he's been exposed. So I think he'll probably be fired. The one guy that will be fired as well is in Jacksonville. You want to talk about a fall from grace. This guy won a Super Bowl with the Eagles not that long ago. Got fired by them, and he's now gotten fired. He'll get fired by Jacksonville. I'm surprised he's still – I thought he was going to be a guy that got fired by the end of the season. He still could, but if you haven't fired him by now, I'm not sure when you're going to fire him. But nevertheless, I feel like, things are changing when it comes to NFL's owners and their attitude towards firing coaches. I'm not saying everybody's becoming the Steelers who never fire coaches, but it feels to me like the tide is changing a little bit. It feels to me like these teams are going to stick longer and stay around longer and stick with these coaches a little bit longer because they figured out if you change coaches every, 2 years or 3 years, you never are going to have the ability to really get moving move your team and your organization forward. Sometimes it might take 2 or 3 years to have what is in, what I would call the personnel in place to win a lot of games. I'd say the clearest example of that is what we talked about with the Chargers. Think about the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh is a really, really good coach, and he's gotten that team to play above their head. In some ways, he's gotten that team to play and put themselves in position for a playoff. But if you watch that team, at least one off season away from really being a contender. And so sometimes, a guy comes in and it might take 2 off seasons to rebuild the roster. Well, for a long time, that wasn't acceptable. If you weren't showing progress and winning by the end of your 3rd year, you were gone. I think what teams have figured out is it's just not a very good policy to keep firing coaches. Oh, man. End of the day, I need some coffee. Now, from now on, before I do this little video every day, I think I'm going to crush a bunch of coffee and caffeine because 5 o'clock. I've been up, working, doing stuff all day, but nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. I just was basically trying to explain to you why I am yawning a little bit. Now, one thing Ray Fittipaldo wrote about today is that the Steelers have used this extra time, right, to work on their red zone offense. And they worked on their red zone defense as well, but I don't think that's nearly as much of a problem as their red zone offense. If you're kicking 6 field goals in a game, it's great for your kicker, but it also means that you're not moving the ball and you're not scoring touchdowns. And so Mike Tomlin had his weekly news conference today, basically said, focused ourselves in a couple of areas we feel like we need to shore up, particularly red zone offense and red zone defense. We treated the last several days as a mini bye from a coach's perspective and took a deep dive on some of the schematics in those areas and turned our attention to Cincinnati and what they do in those areas, all in an effort to make engineering a victory more fluid. So that's what he said. It's just going to be interesting. So there's a couple things. He basically gave George Pickens a little bit of a pass and said that basically the actions of the Browns is why he was not in position to catch the Hail Mary. That's just what what he's saying. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but I do think that it's important to note that Mike Tomlin is always going to stand behind his guys, no matter what. So, this is going to be interesting this week in Cincinnati because I really feel like it's important for them to sort of get back on the winning, wagon. They need to do that. And if and this is a week they're able to do it, I think they have a chance. And so it sounds like Alex Highsmith might be back this week, which is good. It sounds like they actually don't have many injuries to even think about or worry about, which is the bad part of playing on Thursday night is you got to play on 3 days rest. So you got guys that are banged up and they're, all that other stuff. But the good side is that you get extra days off and your guys get healed and rested. And so by the time you play in Cincinnati on Sunday, you should have a really good opportunity to have a rested team. Of course, Cincinnati's going to be rested too. The game's always on at Archie's. Archie's on Carson Street. Get down to Archie's for 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. Archie's is also the home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Archie's also is the home of NFL football. If you want to call on Sundays and you're looking for a place to watch all the games, you can watch them at Archie's on Sunday. They open at noon. They're open all the way until the last game is over. So if you want to watch football all day and you are looking for a place to do it, go to Archie's. And when you get there, tell them that I sent you. And, of course, on Monday nights, there's a good chance you might catch me down there too. If you do, say hello. And we will see you at Archie's on Carson Street in the South Side. Couple of other news and notes here that we can just get to real briefly. There was a story about Cade Bell, the offensive coordinator at Pitt. Apparently is involved on some level with Oklahoma. Now, it sounds to me like it's one of these things where Oklahoma maybe inquired about him and they reached out maybe, and I probably didn't even reach out. But the thing I'm going to tell you is I'm not sure that he's actually earned something like an SEC team coming to get him. I'm just not sure really that he's earned that. I think one of the biggest things and one of the most untold stories about the Steelers going from 7-4 to 3-4, right? Meaning they lost 4 games in a row. I mean, I'm sorry, they were 7-0 to 7-4, 7-0 to 7-4, and they're 3-4. One of the biggest things is that basically the offense is not working anymore. Teams have figured him out. They've figured him out. This offense that he brought in, it was all the rage, and everybody talked about how he was taking the ACC by storm. Something happened right about the time when they played Cal. You know, up until that point, they had scored, they scored a bunch of points against Youngstown. Who cares? They scored against Cincinnati and West Virginia. They scored against North Carolina, but then they played Cal. And against Cal, they only scored 17 points. Now, the next week, they scored 41, but after that, it was pretty clear their offense was not really nearly as good as it was early in the season. And that was, to me, the danger of bringing him in. And so, when I hear these stories, I always say to myself, when I hear, okay, so-and-so is talking to this team, or so-and-so is desired by this team, or this coach won, I always weigh it against, does it make sense? And my thing is, I don't think it does. I just don't. So I feel like it's important to note that, every time you hear a rumor like that or read a rumor like that, you have to make sure that it makes sense before you even take the next step. And I just don't think that one really makes a lot of sense. Anyway, tomorrow there'll be practice for the Steelers. We will break it down, break down everything else, and we'll have some fun stuff to talk about for Thanksgiving. Obviously, Thursday there's some games, and I will be back Friday. We'll do this tomorrow at 5, and then on Friday at 5, and we'll go from there. Until then, take it easy. I am Paul Zeise. It is the Post-Gazette daily live show. And again, if you could like and all that stuff that Adam says about helping us out with the algorithm, we could do that too.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.